There are already laws on the book that talk about utilities. So, for example, it's the Public Utilities Act, and it's been in effect since 2008. But again, it doesn't apply to us. We don't really have to do anything for it. It is a law that governs the public utility companies. So, like Nicor and ComEd, I took a look at it. Man, it just tells these companies what they can and cannot do. It's very, very detailed. And one of the things it tells the Nicor and ComEd or whatever the electric and gas companies are, because we know that there's more throughout the state, that they can't turn off the gas or electricity when it's the tenant's only source of heat on there. But they do give us some, or excuse me, they give the utility companies some guidelines. So if the National Weather Service says it's going to be 32 degrees or lower within the next 24 hours, they can't shut off the gas or electricity if that's, used for to the tenants' heat. And not just tenants, this applies to everybody across the state. And then they also can't terminate or turn off the gas or electric any day before the holiday or on a weekend when the temperature is going to be 30 degrees or lower. I didn't know this when before I researched this, so that's kind of nice. So when it gets really, really cold, your tenants are still going to have heat, even though they haven't paid their gas bill, they haven't paid their electric bill, whatever the situation might be. If they're at risk for termination, Nicor and ComEd cannot turn off the gas or electricity, under these circumstances. And I mentioned where it applies to every single residential building in the state, not commercial properties, residences. Doesn't matter if it's a rental property or not. And it does include apartment complexes. In this Public Utilities Act, it also does have some cooling requirements, but this is the information that has changed with the new law. So let's take a look at what the new law says. So, it was a bill. Here's it's a public act, and it just then amends the cooling requirements for that public act we just took a look at. And the goal of this new act is to prevent the utilities being cut off basically when it's hot. They had some cooling requirements, but they're tightened them up a little bit and, had some new requirements for them. And they didn't really say, okay, this is why we're doing it, but I think all of us can probably guess why is, anytime we have the heat waves here, especially in the city of Chicago with those high rises, what happens? Unfortunately, some people do pass away from the extreme heat. So I think this is why they are passing this new utility termination law to try to prevent as much as possible these heat-related deaths. And it already has gone into effect. Of course, we're in the middle of winter. It doesn't really apply until the summer, but of course we'll get there eventually. And again, just to reiterate, you don't have to do anything. It applies to Nicor and ComEd, not to the landlords, but it will affect us here in Illinois. So let's take just a quick look at it. And what it tells us, tells Nicor and ComEd and all the utility companies is they can't turn off the gas or electricity when the tenant or anybody hasn't paid if the gas and electricity is the way that everybody is cooling themselves. And again, it's determined according to the National Weather Service. So when the temperature is going to be 90 degrees or higher for the next 24 hours, and just like the heating one, any day before a holiday or on the weekend when the temperature is 90 degrees or higher for the next 24 hours, or when the National Weather Service issues, they use those terms, heat watch, heat advisory, excessive heat warning. I don't exactly know what they mean, and I didn't think we really cared looking up all these definitions. But whenever any of these three conditions happen, then that's it. The utility companies cannot turn off your tenants' cooling apparatus there because they haven't paid their bill. And again, applies to every single residential property in Illinois, including apartment complexes. There really aren't any other additional like Cook County's, Chicago, or municipality requirements when pertaining to heat or heating or cooling there. The only one I could find was the cooling ordinance only for the city of Chicago, went in effect in June of 2022. And it doesn't really apply to most of us, but it says that residential buildings do have to provide air conditioning just in the common areas when the temperature is 80 degrees or higher. But so far, it only applies to basically the big high rises, a residential building that's 80 feet tall, or maybe there's 100 units or more. And especially, it definitely applies to all senior housing. To conclude, this law here. And I guess in my opinion, this is actually pretty good for the landlords, us here, because at least you're gonna rest assured that the AC, if you provide the AC and your tenant is not paying, that's not gonna be cut off on those super hot days. I mean, I don't know if not having the AC running for a day or two there is going to affect I guess what I'm worried about is the wood floors. It does start warping the wooden surfaces, extreme heat like that, at least for a couple of days. There, if it's super, super hot, hopefully, your AC in your property won't be turned off there because the tenant is not paying for that. And then maybe just one other little tip, because I always want to make sure, of course, and I think you guys would too, is we want to make sure that there's always heat and that there's always, cooling there in our properties. It's always a good idea to set up what are called like landlord accounts for the gas and the electricity. So if the tenant's utilities, do get cut off, they're going to automatically be turned on in your name. You'll get notifications that I could turned off. You can sort of monitor the billing there.